If that is the potential that is out there, we want to go and grab it, seize it, and help you benefit from it. So don't underestimate the scale of ambition that we have for our country and for your sector.
Well, hello and welcome to our first Post Live here in London. I am delighted to be here tonight with my guest, Secretary Peter Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
And so this is my first time back in the United Kingdom since last year's AI Summit at Bletchley Park. Obviously, there was a different government here at that time, and you were a bit critical of their approach to artificial intelligence regulation. Can you tell me what you're going to do differently?
Yeah. Well, welcome back. I think you come back to the same weather you probably had last November. Well,
it's a little warmer.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. At the time, I was full of praise for the concept of having the Safety Summit. I was critical of the fact that, well, two things. Firstly, when the summit was first mooted as an idea, it was quite a balanced summit that was looking at opportunities and the safety of AI. And I wanted it to be seen in the round. The closer we got to the summit itself, the more the opportunities dropped off, and it became more entirely focused on safety. And I understand the reasons for that. I just think that we missed the chance to look at the huge potential AI had, as well as the safety issues, because we need to get both right. And you can't have one without the other. And I want both to be fully explored. That was my first issue. The second one was the sort of landing zone on safety. The Prime Minister did a speech at Bletchley, on the eve of Bletchley, and he said two separate things in two successive paragraphs of his speech. The first was that he believed that frontier AI and AI posed a threat to national security and life itself. And in the second paragraph, immediately afterwards, he said, but I'm not going to rush to regulation. And I thought that that was a strange thing for a prime minister to stand up and say. Imagine in the nuclear age, or at that point, if you'd stood up and talked about the power that nuclear weapons and nuclear technology would have, but don't worry, I'm not going to rush to keep this stuff, regulated. So I just wanted to take a more balanced approach to it, and I wanted to make sure that government, on behalf of the citizens and the people we represent, and the global community, global citizenry, that governments have teeth in this, that we're not bystanders. So the voluntary code that was committed to at that point, entirely supportive of it and have kept it. I want to put it on a statutory footing so that government has some teeth in it as well. We're not just bystanders to what unfolds.
And tell me what having some teeth in it would look like. What penalties would companies face if they didn't comply with that code?
Well, the key thing actually is, and let me just say on behalf of not on behalf of, but let me say about the companies, because when we talk about safety, I do not want the impression to be given that it is government only cares about safety and the companies creating and innovating and developing these products don't, because actually safety is shared. I mean, the people who work in these companies, they care deeply about the countries that they've brought up in, and the way of life, the democratic values of countries, and also they care deeply about life itself, and they understand the power better than anybody of the technology that they're developing. But the key thing is by having the compulsion to release the pre-release models for testing. And of course, the US have an outstanding safety institute. Britain has outstanding safety institute. I just want these pre-release models to be out there and tested. Now, when you uncover issues, when there are things that we want to talk about having been released, that conversation is very, very productive. So the thing I want teeth in most is actually the power to actually compel the release. Now, I don't think that there is, at the moment, the need for that compulsion, but I don't know what the future says. And there could well be an insurgent company that comes up and uses the absence of signing up to the voluntary code as for competitive advantage. That would bring the entire code to its knees because of the intense competitive nature of the industry. So this is actually about protecting the sector as well, and the companies that are already at the frontier end of the scale. So there's lots of reasons why having a statutory footing to it is the most important part of it.
And you just mentioned the UK AI Safety Institute. It's been about a year almost since that launched around the time of the summit. Can you tell me what you think its greatest accomplishments are to date?
I would say that its greatest accomplishment is actually maintaining and building great relationships with the companies themselves. And in certain areas, I think the frontier AI companies would describe the relationship they have as akin to much more of a partnership than one of a kind of a standard regulator or on behalf of a state, because that's what we're aspiring to do. We're trying to bring a very specific set of expertise that is brought to bear on behalf of citizens and, of course, the state, but it is also there to provide real, true safety expertise and bring it into the way that the frontier model evolves. Now, of course, people think from the outside that, these frontier companies are, they're like Meta and they're like Apple and they've got, 55,000 people working for them and 40,000 on one campus. They're not. They're all mostly less than 1,000 or, early thousands of people, and they're growing exponentially. They are focused on innovating. They're focused on competing. That is why they are frontier. By definition, it's why it's called frontier. So I don't think safety in that competitive environment is always at the very, very top all the time. So we need to bring a safety element into the mix that is focused absolutely on safety, but it is done in a constructive way. The fact that they have maintained a trusting and productive relationship with these companies, and it's been so fruitful, I think is an incredible achievement, bearing in mind the competitive nature that they are operating within.
And you just brought up trust, which I want to talk about a bigger question, which is how do citizens here in the UK feel about this technology? We've seen some polling that shows a lot are concerned about job loss. What do you think needs to be done to address these public fears about artificial intelligence?
It's sophisticated because we are talking about a general purpose, sophisticated technology. So people are exhilarated and excited about the way that it's making access to information better. It's transforming banking, commerce, travel products and services for them, and that's great. They are, when I say they, the public are concerned about the negative aspects of disruption, deeply concerned about the impact it will have on the workplace, but also oftentimes are already using it in the workplace. And that's why it is sophisticated. So when you ask one question, are you worried about how AI will impact your job security? Very, very different response to, are you using, is AI making the routine and the administratively burdensome aspects of your job better? So people can have two conflicting approaches to AI, and that's what it is, and that's what's so exciting, but also challenging about the job I have, because that's why safety is important, because I care deeply about the opportunities that AI offers. I am passionate about the opportunities, but I realize we cannot even start exploring the foothills of it until we reassure the public that we have safety baked in at the start. And this is really important for me because AI can put service users of our public services, they can be empowered by information in a way they haven't been before. They can have services wrap around their needs and their routine more to an extent that's never been possible before. The public services and government, why can't we aspire as a government? It might sound utopian, but why not be? To have the way that government interacts with citizens better reflect the way that citizens engage with travel, commerce, and banking services. If we can have that as an aspiration, then fantastic. Why can't we aspire to have the jobs that are created by these industries available to everybody from every background? Because right now they're not. Why can't we have the wealth that's generated from these companies better distributed around the UK? Because I'm a progressive politician, in the UK definition of progressive politician. And I believe that everyone from every background and every geography in our country should have equal access. Now, people think that there is a sense of inevitability about the way this technology is going to land in our society and economy. There's a sense of fatalism amongst so many people that I speak to about the way that this technology is going to impact us, but there's not. We as a government, we do have agency in how this technology will be used, how it will be rolled out, and who benefits from it, who has access to it, whose lives can be transformed by it. We do by working with other countries, with proper statecraft, can make sure that we can work globally to keep it safe and explore the opportunities, to reinforce our democratic values. So I don't believe that we are bystanders in this, and that's why I'm excited about it. But we have to reassure people that safety is baked in at the start, and then what we can do and the places we can take our country and its citizenry, I think, is boundless.
And in line with that optimism, you've talked about how the economy could grow by 5% because of AI. Could you tell me a little bit about where you think those productivity gains will come from, and how that will happen given the current adoption rates of this technology?
Yeah, so I was actually quoting government data, and it's actually the previous government, so you can't say I'm being biased about it. But the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, the independent financial institution that holds our treasury to account, provides independent financial data to government based on government spending and accounts. They said that if digital technology, AI, was fully integrated into the economy and adopted throughout the economy in the way that it's currently adopted by certain parts of the economy, and I'm talking currently available technology, AI, then it would increase productivity by 5%. By year 5, it would create £28 billion worth of fiscal headroom for the exchequer. These are enormous opportunities that are out there, and yet they're being missed at the moment. So that's why I see, that's why I'm optimistic. Why what we have to do is really, really very difficult, because it's something that government doesn't traditionally do very well. And it's why I have repurposed the department that I run, which is now Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Because before it was a funding body mostly, funding agency. Now it is a delivery department, and it's an economic department. An economic department because if the economy itself isn't doing the adoption, and it's mostly in the SME sector that's lagging behind, and it's a smaller bit of the SME sector that's lagging behind. If the economy isn't doing it itself, then something needs to happen. Government can't do to the economy. You can't do a digital adoption to the economy. But if the economy is not doing it to itself, and government isn't capable of doing it all on its own, then we've got to find ways of doing this differently and better, because we can't just let the two sectors just rattle on, because at the current rate, we're missing so much potential for our economy, so much potential for people to have their potential in the workplace and economic potential to be fully explored, that we cannot be idle bystanders. So I'm looking at ways to creatively interact, in some cases assertively, with the economy to make sure that we can get digital adoption taken up, and in a way that that positively disrupts, not negatively.
What would assertive action look like?
Well, these are things that we're going to be announcing at some point, so tempting though it is to pre-announce things that we're working on, let me just give you an example. What government normally does, 9 times out of 10, is you've got a problem in the economy, not enough digital uptake. So the previous government did what is routine in this situation. They went to the Treasury, came back with £7 million and set a grant up where if you are a company and you want to adopt digital technology, apply for the grant, we'll give you money and you go and do it. Now, of course, I stopped this grant with a week or two coming into office and to rethink it and to rethink how we use that £7 million, because my question was quite simple. What business person gets up in the morning, or who's running a business, maybe a founder of a business, that's a very stable business that's been running for 15, 20 years, doing the same thing brilliantly every day, but they don't see themselves as at the cutting edge. Who in that position wakes up and thinks, oh, I wonder what government grants are available today? I mean, they just don't. Or if they think, I need to start updating my IT systems, I know, I'll go to the government website and see what's available. It's just not how it works. The people we need to get to, the businesses we need to get to, don't interact with government in that way. So therefore, I want to look at how the economy works and then how we can interact with it. So for example, there are companies out there, big primes, that have supply chains with several hundred suppliers. In the case of some of them, they'll have thousands of suppliers. Why not work with them to engage interact with their supply chain. And it's not getting to the whole economy, but we could start to really interact with supply chains and use that, use the people, use the businesses that all parts of the economy do listen to because they engage with and they have to engage in different ways to keep up with their suppliers because their business depends on it. You know, so I think that's what I mean by being creative. It's what I mean by being assertive. That's just me being, you know, just talking freely about what being assertive might look like. I'm not saying that that's what we're going to end up doing, but there are ways of engaging with the economy which have more grip than just throwing money out of central government and then saying you've spent £7 million and saying that that is in somehow a measure of success, rather than actually thinking what has changed, who have you spoken to, what behaviours have changed, and how you can get to it.
Well, we certainly wouldn't mind if you want to get ahead of any announcements and make some news here at our first Post Live event in London. But, you know, you talked about some of the challenges for government in this space. And, you know, one thing that we see in Washington constantly is the challenge of tech expertise in the government. How are you thinking about that, especially as you rethink your department?
It's such a good question. It's such an amazing challenge to have. What I've noticed since getting this job is one of the things we did with DCIT, and the department that I lead, is that in opposition, I came to the conclusion that we needed to have a very powerful digital centre of government. And the reason for that wasn't because I thought, great, I might be a Secretary of State, how do I have the most amount of power and influence as possible? What I did was looked at the challenges that the economy had, looked at international best practice. When you look at countries that has managed the digital transition within government and the interaction that citizens have with the state very well, and look at the best practice. I came to the conclusion that we needed, in order to deliver those outcomes, including the ones we've just been speaking about, we needed a very powerful digital centre. So the different units at the centre of government that are responsible for delivery, we brought together and have brought into to my department. And that gives me much more power, or it's much more magnetic as a force, because we have, and we are creating, a resource in government that is capable of doing bigger, better, bolder, more creative things than this government has ever done before. Therefore, if you are somebody that's out there and you have these outlier skills, that you are capable of doing programming, project management, digital engineering at that level, and you want to know how you put that to good use, then there is this option now to have really impactful input into the way a government delivers for an entire country. That is very attractive. We have to think about things like pay, of course, and we will probably be paying, and we are paying, above the average civil service, but we offer something that no other company can, and that is, transforming the entire citizen experience of a country, making people safer, wealthier, healthier. That's a pretty amazing thing to come and be part of. And people are coming towards it. They are gravitating towards it. And I have discovered something which a lot of people are sadly not cognizant of, and that is people who go into tech companies, they care passionately, a lot of them, about public service, the responsibilities that come with operating and creating this technology within a certain society, and the responsibility to make society better. And at times, they want to just jump into the organization that is responsible for doing that on behalf of the citizens, and that's government.
And on that point, you mentioned you've looked to other countries for best practices. What countries are doing this well right now?
Well, loads of countries are doing things sometimes in different areas very well. So it's not like there's one country that I'm just modeling this on. But, Singapore, UAE, Latvia are all Estonia are doing really interesting pieces of work. And these are all well known to lots of people. They're all very different to our country. And they have different security challenges. They have different democratic opportunities or different relationships, different styles and methods of government. So what I have to do is think, where are we trying to take Britain? What is applicable, what is not? How do you adapt for it? But ultimately, not just think that my job is to take best practice and then just roll it out from elsewhere. It's to think, what is the British potential? And I'm pretty sure that if we get this right, and the agenda that you will start to see unfold in the coming weeks, actually, not in the months and years, that people will start to see that we're doing this in a way that is true to the British opportunity, the diversity and complexity and sophistication of our economy, the fact that we have a welfare state, so therefore we have access to data that very, very few countries in the world would have, make sure that we reassure the public that their data is would be safely used, that they have the ability to be in control of their data. Privacy will always come first, but if we use it wisely and smartly, then we can use data to discover new cures, do research that can completely, socially and in terms of medicine and other areas, we can be absolutely pioneering in the way that we develop and roll out everything from medicines through to social understanding to keep people safe, to help people fully explore their potential and so forth, from education, health, and right across the board. You know, they're just a couple of examples of what we can do when you learn from what's out there, apply it to here, but don't feel constrained from what other countries are doing as well. In the US, when it comes to medical data and medical use of technology, has many, many areas where it's pioneering. But we are, when it comes to our population, we're globally, you know, we're sort of small, medium-sized, we're lower end of the medium-sized countries with 75 million people. But because of the welfare state, we have, you know, we have access to data sets that America doesn't have, even though you have a population that's 4 times the size. And again, we will always, always put safety, privacy, and control in the hands of every single citizen. But once we reassure people and use it wisely, just think of the possibilities that we have if we get it right.
And on that point of healthcare, I wanted to bring in a question that we actually got from the audience about how the UK will handle this moving forward. And so I'm just going to read this right now. Flory Brazil in California asks, does the UK already have a regulatory scheme in place for AI in healthcare? How does the NHS intend to balance the benefits AI already brings to healthcare with the need to protect the public from potential harms?
I think it's a really interesting question because actually it comes to the heart of how we regulate AI. The AI bill that I'll be bringing in is a very focused piece of legislation on frontier AI. What we've done and what the previous administration did, which I support, their approach was to task each of our regulators, and we have a very mature, we have a very, very effective regulatory landscape here in the UK. We've tasked every regulator to assess the impact that AI will have on the sectors they regulate and act accordingly. And my department is funding a lot of the work that they're doing in the research and working with them to make sure that that's done effectively. Healthcare isn't just one thing, because healthcare, AI, again, being a general purpose technology, AI will have an impact on clinicians' productivity. AI will, hopefully sooner rather than later, start taking the administrative burdens off of clinicians, which means that they can start spending more time actually doing frontline clinical work with patients. But also in Huddersfield Hospital up in the north of England, it's the first radiography department to fully integrate AI into its radiography department. That means that productivity has gone from 700 scans to 1,000, far more effective at detecting very, very, very early stage patterns that can detect lung cancer, for example, even when you're not scanning the chest area, looking for pain in that area. And the staff have all gone back to be retrained because the 20% of all clears are now delivered by AI with absolutely stunning accuracy. And the company which, and incidentally, even though staff have been reskilled and getting paid higher because of the increase in productivity for the department, cost neutral. You know, this shows the incredible impact it has on when it's used wisely. The company which developed that technology didn't see a regulator that neatly regulated exactly what it was doing. So actually voluntarily went to a regulator and said, you know, will you engage with us? Because we think, you know, we need to be examined in this area. So look at the different uses. Surgeons are now being assisted, joint surgery. So all of these different areas show that we need to be very careful, because in answer to the question, we could just list, we could do a piece of legislation that has 200 specific examples of how AI can be used and just come to a judgment in each of them. We need to start injecting principles into our regulatory landscape. We need to make sure that safety is there at the outset, and companies need to prove safety in a way that's appropriate for them before it starts getting rolled out. And then on the frontier end, we have a specific piece of legislation for it. But in order to signal where I'm going into the longer term, non-frontier AI is going to have multiple impacts. There will be safety concerns, just as with online harms and social media harms, which we were far, far too late to grasp. I'm already thinking carefully about how the regulatory and legislative landscape into the medium term needs to probably adapt, so that we don't end up with a situation that harms come crashing into our society. We end up with a grotesque situation where young people are either committing suicide or killing each other, which has happened in recent years, before we start to act. If we can get ahead of the curve, we can reassure the public that we will keep them safe, and we can allow them to safely explore this potential and make sure that harms are mitigated from the outset without having to retrospectively legislate. And one very quick thing, today we're speaking on the day when I launched the Regulatory Innovation Office. My department now has an office where, when we see an innovation that's coming up, and our 4 priority areas to pilot right now are going to be AI, automation. We have Wave here, you're going to hear from brilliantly afterwards. Automation, including cars, space, and biotech. Those are the 4 areas we're focusing first. When there is innovation being emerged, so spin-outs, very nascent technologies, this unit will proactively expedite and assist those innovators through the regulatory landscape. So we cannot have people with innovations being bogged down in compliance precisely at the point we need them to be out there commercializing, making safe, getting it out there into society and the economy so it can benefit the health and the economy of the nation. So we're doing lots to try and make sure that our country can be right there at the front of fully exploiting all these opportunities.
Well, Secretary, I have so many more questions about that, but unfortunately we are out of time today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Post Live.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And please stay tuned for our next segment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
For doing that.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, all right.
It was fantastic to hear those insights so early on from the Secretary in the new department. And I think we can all agree it's a very exciting time. In fact, as we've just heard, generative AI in general is a very exciting new frontier, but it's crucial that we get this balance right between innovation and risk. As I said, I'm Susie Watford, Chief Strategy Officer at the Washington Post, and joining me to discuss how best to invest in the artificial intelligence revolution is Phil LeBrun, Director of Enterprise Strategy at Amazon Web Services. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Susie.
I'm going to kick straight off, and I want to get into how AWS really helps ensure that their customers are equipped to use generative AI responsibly, and what the overall kind of role of education is to help operationalize responsible AI.
Yeah, it was really interesting hearing Peter talk about this fact that all boats can rise, but we need to be pioneers, but pioneers in a safe way. So through the AWS Skill Builder program, for instance, there's a number of courses already available, responsible AI practices, how to build applications securely in a compliant way, in a responsible way. We recently launched the AI practitioner certification. I sat it. I passed. And I'm a technologist, but
awkward.
from a long time ago. But what I found really interesting about that is it equipped me with a set of skills which wasn't just about technology, but it was how to think about this new technology in a very broad way from a safe, responsible perspective. And I think that's really important that executives are thinking about how do they educate themselves. Recently, Amazon launched the Trusted AI Challenge with universities. How do we build applications in a safe way? So those creators of those large language models that Peter was talking about, how do they think about the safe use of those? So for instance, if you're using those for coding, how do you do it in a way that you're ensuring that malicious code isn't being introduced or loopholes in your code? So really getting them to think through some challenges about getting this right from day one.
Great. And before I continue, I must say, just as a disclaimer, that Jeff Bezos, obviously founder of Amazon, is also the owner of the Washington Post. Please get in there before I ask you my next question, which is, how is AWS really making strides around generative AI here in the UK?
It's, I'm a Brit. I mean, I'm very proud of the history we've got in this country, some of the brightest engineers, scientists, some real pioneers in every industry. Recent research shows that this is £520 billion opportunity through to 2025 with digital technologies and generative AI. The Alan Turing Institute, just up the road in Euston here, talked to about 1,000 public sector professionals recently. 50% of them, roughly, knew what generative AI was. About 20% are using it. So that's good, but there's so much more to do there. In 2020, we announced we were going to train for free 29 million individuals on cloud skills by 2025. We surpassed that this year with 31 million. And it was only last month we announced an £8 billion investment in the UK in cloud and in AI. So all of these investments are critical. But I think critically it comes back to skills. One survey shows us that of companies that are looking for people with technical skills, so that's about 76% of these companies looking for individuals with technical skills. Only about 11% of those seeking work have those skills. Right. So the technology has come a long, long way. Now, how do we bring the people along on this journey as well? Because it produces such a unique opportunity. We know that salaries can increase by up to 31% with these skills, but more importantly, it's the opportunities that these technologies give people in society.
And how about with companies? So are there examples of how companies are using AWS generative AI to have that kind of positive social impact here in the UK?
Swindon Borough Council has been a very progressive council in terms of the use of technology. They've been using Amazon Bedrock, our generative AI solution. They produced a solution called Easy Read. So about 15% of the population have learning disabilities. So how do we make it easier to digest these vast amounts of information that's being thrown at them, give them access to services? So taking all of that and bringing that to them in a way that's easy to digest. I'm a Brit, so I don't use the word excited very often, but particularly in healthcare, Genomics England are working with the NHS, using generative AI to look for ways of diagnosing and treating diseases, for instance. Looking at things like genetic variations and what's the impact on medical conditions using Amazon Bedrock. And in broader industry, NatWest Group, for instance, have worked with us. So Anthropic's Claude large language model and Bedrock, working with our Generative AI Innovation Center to produce applications that are well thought through, they're safe, but to deliver to their customers the opportunity to really think differently about their financial well-being. So it's really interesting, even in the commercial space, we're already seeing customers bringing this technology to the fore to help their customers embrace the power of generative AI, but in a very safe way.
Fantastic. Well, I'm a Brit, but I've been in America long enough that I say excited a lot, and that sounds to me like very exciting progress. Phil LeBrun, thank you very much, Director of Enterprise Strategy at Amazon Web Services. You've shed a lot of light on the increasingly crucial role, of responsible generative AI, so thank you. I'm now going to hand it back to Kat.
Thanks. You, Susie.
What we've built is an embodied AI system, and I really want to extend the conversation in AI from chatbots and co-pilots and search engines to things like AlphaFold that we just heard about, or embodied AI, bringing AI into the physical world. That's really the big opportunity that we have here. We've been pioneering this technology here out of London and now with our team around the world to come up with some of the ideas that can allow it to be robust and trusted in the physical world.
Well, welcome back. For those of you just joining our live stream, I'm Kat Zakreski, National Tech Policy Reporter here at The Washington Post. And my guest today is Alex Kendall, CEO of Wayve. He's building embodied AI technology to power self-driving cars. Alex, thank you so much for being here with us today.
This is great. Thanks, Kat.
And so I just want to start as one of the world's worst human drivers. I'm very excited about the tech that you're building. But can you walk us through what you mean when you say embodied AI?
Of course. What we've seen from, let me start by saying AI, I think, is an enormous opportunity for the world. And what we've seen so far has been super interesting in ability to extract knowledge, to search things, to be able to chat and converse. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, because what we have in front of us is the opportunity to build intelligent machines that we can trust, we can delegate tasks to, that can totally disrupt the way we go about thinking about physical industries. And so embodied AI is about giving AI a physical interface to the world in a way that can operate in a way that's safe, that operates seamlessly within the complex environments that we live in, and with the intelligence that allows it to complete tasks that are actually useful to our lives. And I think robotics and self-driving cars, of course, are just fantastic examples of this.
And on that topic of self-driving cars, we have a clip to show our audience a little bit of how this technology works. So let's take a look here. This looks like a pretty normal Ford van. Can you tell me what's going on in this video?
Yeah, actually, this is really interesting because so our embodied AI system has been trained and learns to drive with data. And here you can see it driving this van. But actually, you'll see us driving many other types of vehicles, not just a van. There's another one of our vehicles, this car. And the interesting thing is that our system has been able to learn to drive. Here's 3 of our vehicles, and they're each quite different. They have different sensor architectures, different physical geometry, and in fact, we also need this AI to drive in many different locations, including places it might not have been trained to drive before. And that's the benefit that embodied AI can bring. As opposed to previous robotics technology that's more prescribed how it behaves within a set environment. It might follow an HD map, or it might have some hand-coded rules for how it behaves. We've built a technology that learns to drive end-to-end. And so that means that we can go to places that it hasn't been to before, and it can drive based on what it sees for itself. And crucially, the thing that is so important for safety and for trust in these systems is for them to be able to handle edge cases, situations that we may not have thought before that might come up because we live in such an open and unpredictable world. And by developing a system that has this level of intelligence on board the car, that allows it to reason and plan and execute through scenarios that it might not have seen before, this is what we think is going to allow it to operate safely in cities like here in London.
And so for our audience that just watched this video, when we saw it from the view inside the car, there was that green line that came up. Can you tell us what that represents?
That's simply a visualization of where the car is going to drive next, so that you can understand what the car is going to behave. And it's really interesting to sit in the car and see it drive through places like central London, where we have copious amounts of pedestrians, cyclists, and one of the things you'll immediately notice is just how important it is to predict how these other actors in a scene might move around and safely react to their movements, so that you can navigate through a scenario like that. And yeah, essentially that's what our system is. We've trained it to drive, and what we're excited to be bringing to the world.
So navigating central London isn't easy. There's a lot of visitors like me who are maybe looking the wrong way when they're crossing the street, not used to the traffic patterns here. And I'm just curious, what do you see as the biggest obstacles when you're in an environment like that?
Yeah, I think well, firstly, we're not going to see a a flip to autonomy overnight. I think there is going to be a gradual and sustainable growth towards an autonomous future. We're going to start by seeing highly automated and driver assistance systems that will be either a system that assists human driving and provides safety backup or some level of redundancy to the human driving, or we might see to people driving, or we might see a system. The next step is we'll see systems that, for some parts of the drive, they will be able to take the stress of that drive off you and take liability for the driving and give you that time back, through to a fully automated door-to-door solution. And I think that growth is something that we're excited to be pioneering. The AI that we've built is ideal for enabling all kinds of innovative automotive vehicle manufacturers as well as fleets to be able to reap the benefits of that growth. And then, of course, when it does come to full autonomy, the key thing is making sure the technology is provably safe, making sure that it can be trusted in the environment it operates, making sure that we have taken society along with that journey, shown the benefits of this technology, and also proven the level of responsibility required to deploy it. And so I think getting this right is a really important task, and it takes a wealth of partners to be able to do. Not one company is going to do it on our own. We've been excited to be partnering with governments around the world, with regulators, and with some of the best partners in this space, from the automotive manufacturers we work with, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Uber, as well as some of the fleets here in the UK like Asda and Ocado. We've got a wealth of partners around us, and together that's a journey that we're really excited to be embarking on.
And you just mentioned Microsoft and NVIDIA, two US companies that have a lot of control over compute power when it comes to AI. For companies that are building big foundation models, do they have to partner with one of these US tech giants?
Well, compute is a really key part of being able to train an AI system of this scale. And interestingly, an embodied AI system in many ways requires more compute and data than some of these language models that we've seen, because video and imagery data is just a much larger, it takes up more gigabytes than language at a basic level. But as we see these foundation models move to more modalities and introduce not just language, but vision and action, and they're able to control these vehicles, it does put pressure on the frontiers of compute. And so that's why we've partnered with some of the world's best. And not only on the compute side, on the data side, we've aimed to build the most diverse and globally scalable training data to be able to make sure that our vehicle can experience as wide a variety of scenarios, different vehicle types, different sensor architectures, from camera systems to cameras and radar to cameras, radars and LiDAR, all kinds of different architectures to be able to give us that diversity so that we can build a general purpose embodied AI. Ultimately, I think we have an opportunity to provide a system that is the safest embodied AI to fleets and automotive manufacturers, because it can learn from such diversity, and that's all possible because of the compute that we train it on.
And you mentioned safety and also bringing society along with this shift, but I think a lot of people are kind of terrified to get in a self-driving car for the first time. What's your message or advice to them?
Well, it's actually not typically been my experience. I've been on thousands of demo drives with some of our partners, guests, and friends, and it's what's quite interesting to me is just how quickly the conversation slips from looking at the vehicle very intently to all of a sudden just forgetting that the car is driving itself and looking and facing me and just having a normal conversation. It's amazing to see how our vehicle displays human-like behavior, whether it's the nudging that's required to make its way through highly congested areas, or whether it's cautiously peeking around corners that might be occluded and making sure it is safe and it can actually see what's happening ahead before making a driving decision and pulling out. All of these kind of behaviors just lead to a level of trust that I think very quickly it becomes normalized. And of course, trying it for the first time will be a first step, but I think very quickly the benefits will be clear. It's just, as an industry, we're so determined to bring road deaths down to zero. I think that's a fundamental opportunity that we have here, and I think very quickly the benefits of this technology will become clear.
And I wanted, just since we've had a broader conversation today about regulation and kind of the path forward for governments, I wanted to ask you, we've seen over the years a lot of companies that start in Europe ultimately move to Silicon Valley in order to raise more capital and be part of the ecosystem there. What policies do you think officials in the UK need to adopt in order to keep companies here?
Well, it's been fascinating building a company. I was fortunate enough to found Wave 8 years ago out of the University of Cambridge from some of the research that I was doing in the area. And the experience in the UK is that we have all of the ingredients here to build a fantastic business, to really take a deep tech business from an idea through, I hope, through to product. But today we've built a global company just because to truly bring this vision to life, it's clear that we need to be working with fleets and automotive manufacturers around the world. And I think there's been a lot of complementary benefits from some of the different areas that we work with, such as our team in Silicon Valley or some of the presence that we have in automotive powerhouses like Germany and Japan. But our journey has been neat in the UK because actually the UK started investing in self-driving legislation quite early. The Law Commission, about 6 years ago, started a review and put forward a set of legislation that's the advantage the UK has is, and we were speaking about this earlier tonight around healthcare, but in autonomous driving, there's a possibility of putting legislation in that's clear and uniform throughout the country. And the legislation that was actually brought into law in May this year, the Automated Vehicles Act 2024, enables a clear liability structure, sets clear marketing guidelines of how we set expectations for this technology, and ultimately is focused on bringing these benefits quickly, broadly, safely, and in a way that consumers can trust. And that's a real advantage. I think there's more of these ideas that could be exported as thought leadership. I think others could follow some of this leadership. And we've been really excited to support the growth of automated vehicle legislation here in the UK.
And on that point of exporting some of these principles, I mean, a lot of the legislation around autonomous vehicles in the US is at the state level. Do you think that will be an obstacle to your go-to-market strategy there?
I think that as the technology comes in through L2 and L3, this driver assistance and partially automated technology, I think that that provides an opportunity for more public exposure and I hope public excitement around this technology. But ultimately, dealing with a number of different rules and regulations is going to be more challenging and create more overhead. So I think ultimately, I do hope for a more uniform legislation. And actually, what we're seeing happen through the regulators that we already heavily engage with, like at the UN level with the UNECE and other working groups at that level, we're seeing the leadership to create a set of standards that is likely to be adopted worldwide. And so we hope that this will provide a way to be able to see this technology adopted broadly, not just in some of the most affluent or technology forward areas.
And I wanted to ask you too about the EU AI Act, because a lot of the focus so far has been on how that might impact companies like OpenAI or Mistral. But do you see that that will have implications for your business, and what will those be?
Well, look, we're training models at this scale, and we want to build the most intelligent embodied AI to be able to provide the level of safety and performance that we expect. But the thing that was really important to us in frontier AI model regulation is that this really covers the open and general purpose models, and I think that is important. But when it comes to the specific near-term opportunities that, quite frankly, we just need to move so fast at because the opportunity is so great, whether it's education, healthcare, or transportation, it's going to be really important to have sector-specific regulation. We work really closely with the regulators in automotive transportation, and the expertise they have around these problems means that the specific risks and opportunities can be addressed more directly. And so we're really happy to see in the EU AI Act that there is a carve-out for well-regulated areas like healthcare or like autonomous driving that empowers those regulatory bodies to take the regulation themselves. And so that means that we have the frontier AI legislation for the frontier models, but for where there is a near-term opportunity, we can work directly with the domain experts and address the specific risks and not get bogged down by the risks that just aren't a practical reality for what we're working on.
And we're running out of time, but could you quickly just tell us what your favorite trip has been so far in a self-driving car?
Oh, look, it's the first time you see behaviors for the first time. It's amazing seeing the car grow up over time and learn new things. Like just recently, we saw behaviors where our car would learn to proactively and politely pull over and move out of the way for emergency vehicles, which is, of course, really important to be able to seamlessly operate within a city. But from when we started on the quiet side streets of Cambridge to now driving every day in central London and other cities around the world, each of those times it learns a new and complex behavior has just been incredible. And the people we've had in the back seat, entrepreneurs that have inspired me, like Bill Gates or others, has just been magic to share them with. But as a team, it's awesome to see when we deal with new scenarios safely for the first time and grow the performance and generalization of our model to new scenarios.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Alex Kendall, CEO of Wave, thank you so much for joining us here at Post Live.
Thank you, Kat.
And thank all of you for joining us as well. For those watching online, you can find more of our AI coverage at washingtonpost.com. And for those of us here in the room, it's time to eat. Dinner is about to be served. Please enjoy. Thank you.